Namaste and greetings. I, Neenu Mohan, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav Evam Niti Anusandhan Sansthan, Nayi Delhi, extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI Web Policy Learning. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to day 4 of the Law and Public Policy Youth Fellowship Program, Cohort 4.0 Winter 2024. The chair for this program is Professor Vibhuti Patel, Visiting Distinguished Professor at IMPRI. The lead advisor and legal hands-on sessions expert is Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam. Visiting Professor.
Yeah, thanks, Priyanka.
Sorry.
You change your name.
Visiting Senior Fellow at IMPRI, Advocate, Author, and Researcher of Gender and Human Rights. The conveners for this course are Dr. Ajay Gudavarti, Advocate Selin Thomas, Dr. Simi Mehta, and Dr. Arjun Kumar. The expert panel for today includes Professor Nyla Ali Khan, faculty at Oklahoma City Community College and visiting professor at IMPRI, and Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigamji, visiting senior fellow at IMPRI and advocate, author, and researcher of gender and human rights. We will also share the course outline and reading resources in your email for your kind attention. Before we start today's session, I would like to state the housekeeping announcements. Please join the meeting on time. There will be a Q&A session after each presentation. Share your questions in the Q&A box. The questions must not be posted as an anonymous attendee. Ensure that your questions are precise. Refrain from making general comments in the question to save time. And to begin today's session, I would like to invite our chair, Professor Vibhuti Patelji, visiting distinguished professor at IMPRI, to give her opening remarks. We welcome you, ma'am, and over to you.
Ma'am, you are on mute.
So thank you, Ms. Neenu Mohan, for welcoming the participants, and welcome Professor Nyla Ali Khan and the esteemed participants for the fourth day of this immersive course on law and public policy, with special focus on inclusivity in peace and conflict resolution, rethinking policy, advocacy, and implementation. I express my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Ajay Gudavarti, Advocate Selin Thomas, Dr. Simi Mehta, Dr. Arjun Kumar for putting this course together, and the whole team of IMPRI coordinators. And we will have first a brief recap of what all has transpired in previous 3 days. On day 1, we began with the understanding and the overarching concerns in the peace and conflict resolution. And we also had overview and the learnings of the Oslo Agreement 1993, Belfast Agreement 1998, and Columbia Peace Agreement 2016, where feminists had played very important role. The keynote address by Mr. Sandeep Chachra focused on decolonizing peace building and democracy, the views from Global South, and he talked about decolonization of political economy, currency, and also no to sanction countries and the whole experiences of Cuba, and decolonization of global system. And he also quoted some of the important liberation theologists such as Franz Fanon. I also talked about Samir Amin, William Du Bois, and described that the settler colonial state, they created a kind of a mindset, and we need to get out of that mindset and what we need is a substantive decolonization. And he ended deriding sponge slogans in the name of decolonization. We had a very important presentation by Ms. Rita Manchanda, who has a direct experience of working with the refugees and the displaced people. She spoke about redefining agency and resilience and narrativizing women, war, and peace in South Asia. She gave innumerable examples of Global South in terms of the for the refugees of Myanmar in India, Rohingya refugees, or the condition of women in Afghanistan, or what happened in the currently is happening in Gaza. and she talked about expansion of understanding of military security to human security, and from nation-centric to people-centric approach. She also talked about feminist scholarship, which has visibilized local women's agency, and she also emphasized advocacy and networking at transnational, regional, national, and local levels, and importance of taking 1325 resolution to the civil society organizations, and the WPS agenda thus is a which has thus huge responsibility on women's collectives without nation states providing any material support. So it is in this context that we are talking about sustainable peace, which has to be women-centric, bottom-up, gender-sensitive, and which draws upon the local agency of women. On day 2, we had Professor Swaran Singh, who spoke on the new frontiers in global peace, inclusive policymaking for cyber conflict resolution. And he gave various definitions and various theories, various definitions of peace in a different political geographical context, the Oriental and Occidental understanding of peace. And he also talked about so many Orientalist thinkers, and he also quoted various Orientalist discourses that are happening, and Edward Said, when he critiqued the Western way of looking at the Oriental countries, and he talked about that we need to have a positive peace that needs to be institutionalized in all the cultural, social, and physical structures. Dr. Gladstone Xavier, who spoke after him, was on, he highlighted navigating displacement and peace, policies and practices for refugee, forced migration, and conflict. And he also took up some of the recent controversies about migration, and he insisted that what we need is stakeholder engagement. It has to be participatory pathways. The migrant people should have a voice and representation and voice. And he also quoted the slogan, nothing about us without us. He also recommended data-driven policy on conflict, and what we needed is a disaggregated data according to the intersectional and multiple marginalities of different communities. Inclusive framework has to have inclusive language, and we need to build the capacities of all the stakeholders into the peace discourses, and equitable allocation of resources and their accessibility. He emphasized, and monitoring and evaluation of laws and their implementation. After that, we had a presentation by Dr. Sina Paul, who talked about the grammar of essay and research article writing, and she explained various step-by-step methods of identifying the subject, review of literature, ethical standards, and respect for privacy, and the logical flow of the writing of dissertation or article. And yesterday, we had a very engaging sessions from Advocate Flavia Agnes, iconic figure of Indian women's movement, who has taken up issues of gender-based violence not as advocacy, but as actual day-to-day existential reality of women, have been taken up by her organization and handholding of women survivors of violence. And she shared her experiences of whole right from the 1980 nationwide Mathura rape case, and she gave some of the landmark issues and judgments regarding dowry murders or glorification of sati, the sexual harassment at workplace and Vishakha guidelines, protection of women from domestic violence. And she highlighted that only NGOs can provide survival support to negotiate criminal justice system. And she also reported when a young girl is pregnant due to abuse, role of judge, defense lawyer, public prosecutor becomes very important. And she said that it is where we need to work at a ground level, and we have to work very hard to work within the system, though it is an uphill task, but it is a very, Majlis is doing that, though it is a small organization working in the local context of Mumbai, but they see it as a model. After that, we had a very important session by Dr. Shalu Nigam, who focused on some important laws and the landmark judgments with regards to violence against women and the backlash by the by the predators and misogynist and a very patriarchal backlash that we are having, and also the resistance, the new methods of resistance evolved by individual women and the women's collective. And all of us emphasize the importance of the International Day of Violence Against Women, which is 25th November, and the 15 days of activism, which is very important. She also, Shalu Nigam's presentation was also was on how to tackle technology facilitated violence. And she also mentioned some of the important global challenges that we are having, whether it is in Gaza or Ukraine or Korea, where women have started a movement against misogyny and cyber technology based sexual violence against women. And Giselle Pellicot's episode in a tragedy in France, where she is demanding that shame should change the side. That means instead of victim blaming, we have to see to it that survivors of violence don't suffer in silence. She also talked about some of the heartbreaking episodes in India in recent past with regards to gang rape and murder of women in Unnao, Hathras, even the Patna episode of Pushpa 2, Bilkis Bano's case, where the Supreme Court judgment was extremely inhuman and unjust, where all the rapists were released. She talked about the whole journey from Mathura to Manorama and currently how peace is eluding Manipur. She also said that when the state is not able to provide justice, people take they take things in their own hands. And she gave various techniques deployed by Women's Collective. For example, Appu Yadav case, where the survivors of his sexual violence, they killed him. She also mentioned how digital technologies are employed to violate soul, mind, and body of women. And she also talked about the new campaigns which have started, online campaigns, not all men, yes, hashtag not all men, hashtag all women, yes, all women, and hashtag me too. And this was, she also said that what should we do? And her answer was that we must speak out, we start collaborative action, and we should not leave anyone behind. So today we are going to have equally important session by our guest, Dr. Professor Nyla, and IMPRI team, you please take the proceedings further.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for that insightful recap. Without any further delay, I'd like to invite Professor Nyla Ali Khan for a session on the interplay of gender, community, and nationhood, reimagining peace in Kashmir. We welcome you, ma'am, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good evening to all of you, and it is morning here in America. It's 6:50 a.m., and I'm delighted to be with all of you. So I will talk a little about my research, and then I'm hoping that this is an interactive session. So, as we are all aware, Jammu and Kashmir, which is my state of origin, was the battlefield of armed insurgency and counterinsurgency for several decades, and the political, economic, and sociocultural dimensions of the conflict rendered asunder the fabric of Jammu and Kashmir, particularly the Kashmir Valley. And my analysis of gendered violence and gendered activism in Kashmir is interwoven with my own personal and intellectual trajectory. And in my work, I have explored the struggles of a particular ethnic group, Kashmiri Muslims and Hindus. So at the heart of my work is the contention that inadequate attention has been paid to the gender dimension of armed insurgency and counterinsurgency in Jammu and Kashmir, which I believe stymied even further the emergence of peace, political liberty, socioeconomic reconstruction, and egalitarian democratization. As Diane Mazura et al. Have observed, quote, inattention to and subsequent miscalculations about women's and girls' roles and experiences during particular conflicts and in early post-conflict periods systematically undermines the efforts of peacekeeping and peace-building organizations, civil society, and women's organizations to establish conditions necessary for national and regional peace, justice, and security, end quote. Although women of Jammu and Kashmir have been greatly affected by decades of conflict, by decades of armed insurgency and counterinsurgency in the region, they still remain largely absent in decision-making bodies at the local, regional, and national levels. I am painfully aware of the fact that although substantive ethnographic work has been done by local and diasporic scholars on the brunt borne by Kashmiri women during decades of conflict, as well as on the atrocities inflicted by women, not just by personnel of paramilitary forces, but by the local police, by militant organizations, Kashmiri women continue to be near absent at the formal level. As a Kashmir observer, I recognize the attention paid to gender-based violence in Kashmir by scholars, ethnographers, and NGOs, but not enough attention is given to the political, economic, and social fallout of decades of conflict for women. I contend that not enough emphasis is laid on how Kashmiri women of different classes and political, religious, and ideological orientations can become resource managers and advocates for other women in emergency and crisis situations. Although the international community made a commitment to incorporate gender perspectives in peace efforts and underscored gender mainstreaming as a global strategy for the growth of gender equality in the Beijing Declaration and the Platform of Action in 1995, I observe that not enough has been done toward increasing women's participation in peacekeeping and post-conflict peacekeeping and nation building in Kashmir. It is in the arena of domestic politics that changes in gender composition to favor women today may have significant effects on policies and practices. And here, that such rearrangements of personnel can themselves be seen as responses to the presence of real and growing social processes of a pro-democratic and pro-feminist kind. It remains to be seen if the presence of women in recent legislative assembly elections in Jammu and Kashmir will facilitate the creation of powerful positions for Kashmiri women in decision-making bodies in the regional and national scenario, which is not yet a reality. There is a serious lack of a feminist discourse in political and activist roles taken on by women in Kashmir, where the dominant perception still is that politics and policy making are linked to the powerful, strong male realist rather than the archetypal, gentle, negotiating woman. As in other political scenarios in South Asia, women politicians have for a long time been relegated to the soft areas of social welfare and family affairs. Although political parties in Kashmir have not relinquished paternalistic attitudes toward women, and I'm talking not just about mainstream political parties, but even separatist parties when they existed. They had very paternalistic attitudes toward women as well. Women's rights and gender issues remain secondary to political power. Today in Jammu and Kashmir, women constitute a minority. Increasing the pressures of high visibility, unease, stereotyping, inability to make substantial change, over accommodation to the dominant male culture in order to avoid condemnation as overly soft. So I'm talking about women representatives in the Legislative Assembly. And before Kashmir was demoted to a union territory, we had a legislative council as well. So in those decision-making bodies, women were relegated to the background. Even those women with access to the echelons of power are unwilling or unable to forge broad feminist coalitions and informal networks along party lines. The most effective way to make a gender perspective viable in Kashmiri society would be for women, state as well as non-state actors, to pursue the task of not just incorporating and improving the positions of their organizations within civil society, but also by forging connections between their agendas and strategies for peace building and conflict resolution, as well as the reconstruction of society, with the strategies and agendas of other sections of the populace impacted by decades of conflict. Perhaps it is time to seriously consider a new regional order which would be capable of producing cross-economic, political, and cultural interests among the people of the region. Women in civic associations and in government can lead the way toward a peaceful, pluralistic democracy and support international negotiations for a sustainable peace in the region. I suggest that plurality and heterogeneity adorn the architecture of Kashmir with an emphasis similar to Nellie Richards in her essay, Postmodernism and Periphery, on local political projects, regionalism, peripheral social communities, progressive traditions that have survived the ravages of time, and marginalized forms of knowledge. I seek in multiplicity a powerful politics that facilitates my ability and the ability of other women in the region to engage in different struggles, regional, national, as well as transnational. I consider it incumbent upon responsible feminist scholarship on the Kashmir, on that region, as well as decades of conflict in that region, to underscore and analyze not just the gendered violence in that region, but also on the agentive capacities of Kashmiri women to engage in a temporally embedded process of social engagement, informed by the past, but also oriented toward the future as a capacity to imagine alternative possibilities, and toward the present as a capacity to contextualize past habits and future projects within the contingencies of the moment. I think I would like to talk a little about my concept of women's agency, and then I will turn it over to all of you. So, my attempt to theorize women's empowerment in terms that allow the creation of a space for distinctive subjectivities involves framing the concept with regard to its cognitive, psychological, economic, and political aspects. I borrow eminent educationist Nellie Stromquist's assertion regarding agency, which involves taking decisions that deconstruct cultural and social norms and beliefs that structure seemingly intransigent traditional gender ideologies. The psychological aspect refers to developing self-esteem, for which some form of financial autonomy is a basis. The political aspect involves the ability to organize and mobilize for social change, which requires the creation of awareness not just at the individual level, but at the collective level as well. For me, empowerment is a process that enables the marginalized to make strategic life choices regarding education, livelihood, marriage, childbirth, sexuality, etc., choices that are critical for people to lead the sort of lives they wish to lead and which constitute life's defining parameters. It is important to keep in mind, however, that women are constrained by and grapple with the normative structures through which societies create gender roles. In order to highlight the groundbreaking work accomplished by local agencies, cadres, and social networks in Kashmir, the distinction between traditional praxis that conscript the role of women and progressive roles prescribed for women within Islamic norms, that needs to be underscored by responsible scholarship and social work. The Western preoccupation with empirical observation has led to an inaccurate conflation of Islamic norms with practices. Western feminist epistemologies can impair the research paradigms, hypotheses, and fieldwork on women in predominantly Islamic societies like that of Kashmir. I would emphasize that the articulation of the fervent patriotism of Kashmiri women, which manifested itself in their emboldened presence in 1931, 1947, 1950, and 1975, until the dawn of insurgency and counterinsurgency in 1989, requires research that gives as much credence to the path-paving work of women within religious, familial, and communal frameworks as to the work of those women who deconstructed established frameworks, in order to lead subaltern movements and to motivate minority education as opposed to state-controlled education. I would like to stop with that. I would like to hear from the rest of you, and then I will have more to say.
Thank you, ma'am, for your enlightening address on the deeply valuable insights and also the thought-provoking perspectives. I would like to now invite the chair, Vibhuti ma'am, to share her remarks. Over to you, ma'am. Ma'am, I believe you're muted.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Nyla Ali Khan, for ending with the subaltern movement. So can you just elaborate that what are the kind of inspiring subaltern movements that are happening in Jammu and Kashmir? And also, what are the global solidarities, the nature of global solidarities to such subaltern movements?
So I will say more about subaltern movements. Yes, I'll get to that. So before I get to that, Professor Patel, again, I reiterate that ironically, women in Jammu and Kashmir have not yet found niches in the upper echelons of decision-making bodies, be those political, religious, or social. Again, I reiterate asymmetrical gender hierarchies legitimized by the forceful dissemination of fundamentalist and militarized discourses portend the debasement of women. And Kashmiri society needs to recognize the terror caused by such predatory discourses that swoop down on the vulnerable, devouring their ideological and experiential strengths. The retrieval of the strength that nurtured the rich experiential content of the teachings of mystic poet Lal Ded. The conviction of the women volunteers of the Women's Self-Defense Corps, the vision of women activists who were harbingers of change in the socio-political and cultural realms would facilitate the recomposition of women's roles in the significant process of nation building. So let me... Now, one of the questions that I ask in my work, Professor Patel, over and over is, do women embody the history of a culture and community only as it is remembered in the murky corridors of officialdom? The inception of the militant separatist movement in Jammu and Kashmir in 1989 scorched the landscape, particularly the headway that had been made in providing women with educational and economic opportunities. The ongoing story of the trouble-torn state is replete with gendered violence. And now consider Professor Spivak's delineation of the contexts in which the politics of representation renders mute the figure of the third world woman, within quotes, which would apply to the situation in Kashmir. Professor Spivak observes, quote, between patriarchy and imperialism, subject constitution and object formation, the figure of the woman disappears, not just into a pristine nothingness, but a violent shuttling, which is the displaced figuration of the third world woman caught between tradition and modernization. End quote. Power relations within the prevalent discourses of patriarchy, fundamentalism, militarization, militancy mediate the Kashmiri woman's identity. The valorization of her subordination is underwritten by praxes that legitimize gender identities, which are necessary to patriarchal and fundamentalist dominance. Despite the political mobilization of Kashmiri women during the upheaval in 1931 and the politically volcanic Quit Kashmir movement of 1946, Kashmiri women, by and large, have reverted from the public sphere to the private realm. I was going to say to the Kashmiri realm, from the public sphere to the private realm. The onslaught of despotism in 1931, unleashed by Maharaja Hari Singh, awakened Kashmiri women from their slumber and induced them to rattle the confining bars of the monarchical cage. Remarkably, the illiterate women of Srinagar were initiated into political activism, and it was they who heralded the political participation of educated women. The Quit Kashmir movement of 1946 and 1947 saw the evolution of women into well-informed and articulate protesters, assuming leadership roles in the quest for a Kashmiri identity. You see, when a male leadership was put behind bars or driven underground, women leaders took charge and gave a new direction to the struggle. But this consciousness of women, which could have produced women cadres, was diluted by the reversion to normative gender roles. Attempts to drown the voices of progressive women into oblivion became more frequent with the onset of militancy in 1989, 1990. So another question that I ask is, can women step out of their ascribed gender roles once again to significantly impact socio-political development in Jammu and Kashmir? Can the political and social exigencies of women in Jammu and Kashmir be addressed in more nuanced and purposeful ways? You see, historically, cultural, societal, and market constraints have denied women access to information about the outside world. So the kind of advocacy that we require would be an advocacy that could overturn the historical seclusion of women and provide them with routes to make forays into mainstream cultural and socioeconomic institutions. Perhaps the mobilization of women at the collective level would enable a metamorphosis, fostering the skills and ability of women to make informed decisions about issues in the non-domestic sphere. Culture inscribes a wide range of experiences, which centralizing institutions attempt to render invisible and homogeneous. But women in Jammu and Kashmir, as in other post-colonial countries, are positioned in relation to their own class and cultural realities, their own histories, their sensitivity to the diversity of cultural traditions and to the questions and conflicts within them. Women in Jammu and Kashmir are positioned with regard to the legacies of Sufi Islam, their own struggles, not just with the devastating effects of militancy, but also militarization, and also with the discourses of cultural nationalism and religious fundamentalism, as well as of their concepts of the role of women in contemporary societies. So, to go back to your question about subaltern movements, I would like to talk a little about, let me go back to my work. On the mobilization of women. So in a couple of my books, I have written about the Women's Self-Defense Corps of 1947, in which women of various, of diverse socioeconomic groups, as well as of diverse religious leanings, were involved. Now, the Women's Self-Defense Corps, their agenda, their politics have been distorted by several diasporic scholars who chose to romanticize the militant movement of 1989. It's all very well to have an ideological perspective. It's all very well to have a political perspective. I'm not here to demonize or glorify any one political or ideological perspective. But I think responsible feminist scholarship should look at the plight, at what the plight of the common Kashmiri was in 1946, in 1947, when we were still rattling the bars of the monarchical cage, when common Kashmiris were still struggling to come out of the swamp of illiteracy and poverty. The involvement of women in the Women's Self-Defense Corps said a lot about the agentive potential of those women, about the agential capacities of those women, and roles that they could embrace to walk shoulder to shoulder with their menfolk to pave the path for the growth of a Kashmiri identity, which at that point in time was still in a nebulous stage. You see? And after that, when we talk about the mobilization of women, in my work, I have written about the association of APDP. Let me go to my work real quick. So after the Women's Self-Defense Corps, I've written about the Association of Parents of Disappeared Persons. I have also written about women's vigilante groups, of which I am critical. Particularly I've written about the Dukhtaran-e-Millat, the Daughters of the Nation. And I've written about the Daughters of the Vitasta as well, both vigilante organizations, and I'm critical of both in my work. You see, I believe that in contemporary Kashmiri society, the question of the role of women in the nationalist scenario remains a vexed one. As Anne McClintock observes about the role of the subaltern women in third world societies, quote, excluded from direct access as national citizens, women are subsumed symbolically into the national body politic as its boundary and metaphoric limit, end quote. So in my work on Kashmiri women, I have written about, the Dukhtaran-e-Millat, which was a vigilante organization. And I've written that they claimed that the image of woman as a burqa-clad, faceless and voiceless cultural icon, devoid of the agency to pave a path of her own choosing, is sanctioned by the interpretations of religious scriptures that this vigilante group subscribed to. And they believed that that reinforced her strength and courage of conviction to sacrifice for the family. This group used intimidating and questionable tactics to raid houses that allegedly had been converted into brothels, and they brutally censored liaisons, between college-going boys and girls. The members of this vigilante organization would perhaps never identify the modern Kashmiri woman with the liberated woman of the Western world. On the contrary, this group made a facile attempt to reconstruct historical and cultural discourses in order to inspire the kind of cultural nationalism that fundamentalist politics requires, right? And such organizations advocated the creation of a homogeneous culture devoid of the freedoms that Kashmiri women had traditionally enjoyed. Their draconian methods to enforce the parda reinforced a patriarchal structure in which an unaccompanied woman was rendered vulnerable and curtailed the mobility of technology-savvy youth in an attempt to Arabize the syncretic ethos of Kashmir. And I believed then, as I do now, let me go back to my work on the PDP. And you see, I believed, Professor Patel, that there was an insensitivity in such vigilante reactionary organizations, as well as in former and current regional and national administrations, such as the Congress and PDP coalition government in the state, and the centralizing regimes of the Congress and the Bharatiya Janata Party at the center, toward the diverse interpretations of religious laws regarding institutions of marriage, divorce, inheritance rights, etc., and to the heterogeneity of cultural traditions and the paradoxes within them. Now, the vociferous members of the Dukhtaran-e-Millat, I believed, would have better served the female population of Kashmir by campaigning for quotas for women in the Legislative Assembly. We then had a Legislative Council, and the Parliament and the judiciary as well. I believed then, as I do now, that an increase in the female representation in the Legislative Assembly, the Parliament, the judiciary, would facilitate a cultural shift in terms of gender role expectations, legitimizing a defiance of the normative structure. The intrusion of women into traditionally male domains would cause a perceptible erosion in the structural determinants of sexualized violence. Such a form of empowerment would frame and facilitate the struggle for social justice and women's equality through a transformation of economic, social, and political structures. So I believe that not enough thought has been given either by state authorities or by former insurgent groups to women who were victims of the violence that was wreaked during the conflict. And the women of Kashmir did bear the brunt of that violence. There is no question about that.
But even when the Panchayati Raj Institutions Act has also not been implemented in Kashmir, how does one expect leadership of women in the legislative assembly? No, because that is a stepping stone. In rest of India, like we have 6 rounds of PRI elections, and so many of these women who were active in Panchayat, now they are aspiring to take advantage of the Women's Reservation Act 2020.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah. We still have a long way to go.
Good.
You know, so making constitutional changes is all very well. Making progressive political changes is all very well. What is necessary is the rigorous implementation of those constitutional amendments, as well as progressive political amendments and steps. We require that implementation because, as you know very well, Professor Patel, it takes decades and generations to change mindsets. You see? So, although now we have women in the Legislative Assembly, I don't believe we have a woman representing Kashmir in the Indian Parliament. But to change the mindset that for a very, very long time has believed in a deeply entrenched patriarchal order will take a long time. It will take commitment, it will take discipline, it will require steadfastly advocating for women's rights. You see, and also I have emphasized this in my work, and I believe it a lot more now after having interacted with women from various socioeconomic groups in Kashmir. The misconception about Islam is that it is a homogeneous religion with a homogeneous discourse, which is a misconception that ends up hurting women. And I can talk about Kashmir with confidence. In Islam, we have multiple schools of thought. There is a rich heterogeneity within that religion that must be recognized. When it comes to inheritance laws, when it comes to marriage, when it comes to divorce, when it comes to women's rights, there is a rich heterogeneous discourse within that religion that unfortunately has yet to be recognized, not just at the state level, but at the central level as well. You see, in India, even today, we cling to an outdated interpretation of Sharia law. We still cling to the Sharia law of 1937. Whereas if you look at Muslim personal law in a country like Morocco, Muslim personal law in a country like Tunisia, those are a lot more progressive than the Muslim personal law that we continue to subscribe to in India. You know, and also, as I said in my work, Western feminist scholarship and irresponsible Kashmiri diasporic scholarship conflates Islamic tenets, Islamic epistemology, with cultural practices. Some of our cultural practices are regressive. Some of our traditions, cultural traditions, are regressive. To conflate those with Islamic epistemologies further circumscribes the role of women as well as the rights of women in that society. So, you know, it's all very well to talk about global solidarities, but I think it's important to focus on ground realities. It's important to focus on grassroots movements in Kashmir. Do we still, in this day and age, have grassroots women's movements in Kashmir? If we do, are they going anywhere? Are they enabling progress or not? Or have they been curtailed? You know, it's very important to focus on that.
But as of now, women are using Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act to get all their rights under family law, because the identity politics vitiates everything, no? So they would generally use the act, which is quite progressive and very comprehensive. So we see that women from Kashmir would always like approach the human rights lawyer to litigate under this provision. No?
Yes.
Otherwise, things would
yes.
get polarized. No? Under identity.
Yes, that is correct. That is correct. Yeah. And you know, we see this in the not just in India, but Pakistan, Sri Lanka, South Asia. You're absolutely correct how identity politics further circumscribes spaces for women. And you see the discourse of nationalism, cultural nationalism in Kashmir, as well as in other parts of South Asia, makes it difficult for women to stand up for their rights because they fear being demonized by the society as a whole. They fear being labeled as traitors, as cultural traitors. I've had a couple of discussions recently with attorneys and religious leaders in the Kashmir Valley about women's inheritance rights. You know, and there are Kashmiris who don't want to touch that subject because they are afraid of being labeled as traitors to the dominant cultural and religious discourse in the valley. So if you make them aware of, as I said, you make them aware that there is not just one interpretation of Sharia law in the world, there are multiple interpretations. And every school of thought in Islam has its own interpretation of inheritance rights, marriage, divorce, etc. They don't want to talk about it because for them, Islam, the discourse is homogenized, which is incorrect. You know, and if now Kashmiri women believe that they can find refuge within that domestic violence law, I think that is a step in the right direction.
And their brothers support us, because we know that when we had organized public meeting in solidarity with Shabano and the leaders who tried to disrupt the meeting by throwing rotten eggs and rotten tomatoes and all. And it was in Maratha Mandir and this. And 6 months after that, the same leader came to us with his sister and 3 children who were abandoned by his husband, who remarried. And he says that, he said that do something because he has a good salary. And my sister and 3 children are with us. And we can't look after 4 people, no? And then we had to have a negotiated settlement just on the humanitarian ground, because we knew the CEO of that corporate world and who happened to be from IIT, and we had a member who was from IIT. And we just make 2 checks every month, no? 60% should go to first wife and 40% should be with him. And it was the time where communal polarization was extremely acute in city of Mumbai, 1986 I'm talking of. So these are different ways under the civil laws and this. So where you don't bring any other, only humanitarian thing and the gender justice. These are the only 2 arguments you use. You don't bring the custom, tradition, religion and into the discourse, just that look at your child, or they are your own children, and how can you leave them on road? They have to be looked at. So on those grounds, like we would just have negotiation with Mauli Sahab, and we would say that please intervene. On a humanitarian ground, you intervene. But I think the legal support we don't get only under the PAUDA Act, Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act, because it talks about 5 rights, no? Economic, psychological, emotional, even sexual violence, and and physical violence, no? All 5. So I think hundreds of such cases in session courts and lower courts and high courts are there pending of women who are otherwise who would not get their rights.
That is correct. That is correct. And unfortunately, the interpretation of Sharia law that we still see in India and the interpretation that we see in Kashmir as well, it continues to be regressive. You see, I was raised in a Muslim home, and I was taught that Islamic discourse is emancipatory, that Islamic discourse is progressive, that Islam gave rights to women way back in the 7th century when other religions of the book did not do so. And there are plenty of role models, women role models in Islam that we can look up to. You know, women who were independent, who recognized their agential capacities and who exercised them and who stood up for themselves and their rights. But unfortunately, we don't talk about those positive role models. And it's also the fear of mainstream political parties, their fear of right-wing religious leadership, be it Muslim, Hindu, their fear of, they don't want the wrath of that right-wing religious leadership to be unleashed on them, which is exactly what happened during the Shah Bano case as well. You see, after initially the Congress was very supportive of Shah Bano, but then they didn't want to alienate the right-wing religious leadership. They didn't want to lose that vote bank. So I don't know how much women can expect from mainstream political parties.
They have created their own support systems and communities, no?
Right.
So both out of court, or you can have on the good faith of or humanism of the local religious leaders. At a local level, there are so many inspiring stories of women.
At the local level. That is
local.
absolutely correct. Yeah. That's very true.
But no publicity. We generally don't publicize this thing, fearing backlash. No? So.
Yes, I can see that. I can see that because we still have, as I said, unfortunately, the socio-cultural fabric of Kashmir was ripped apart by militancy, militarization, the growth of fundamentalism, unfortunately. So because of those discourses that still remain prevalent, local stories of progressive leadership or stories of women's emancipation, no one wants to publicize them because you're exactly right. They fear the wrath of,
not on us. It could be against the woman, of the.
That's exactly right. The life of the woman would be made miserable.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Yes. Yeah.
It was really very, very enlightening thing. So grounded, and the way you connected, the local, global, micro, meso, and macro issues, really bright. Your theoretical framework. So many good thoughts we got.
Well, I enjoyed your comments very much. And
Madam Aditi Chaudhary wants to ask.
Yes.
Please go ahead, unmute.
So just real quick, I don't mean to be rude, but it is 7:40 a.m. here.
Must be hungry.
I will have to leave at 8 a.m.
Yeah. And you have to take your breakfast also.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
That is correct.
Aditi, quickly, can you ask your questions or clarification or whatever? Sure. Aditi, are you ready? Can you
Yes, yes.
Please go.
Good
Yeah.
evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
Good morning to you there.
Hi, how are
Um,
you?
yeah, I'm good. I'm from Jammu actually. So yeah, I
Okay.
mean, I completely agree with your viewpoint that women are less represented here. I mean, the very fact that women are less represented, it's even rare. I mean, no one admits that. I mean,
Yeah.
everywhere you go, it's like not even acknowledged in open. I mean, this narrative. So, I mean, conflict affects women disproportionately. I mean, it sort of extinguishes women's agency. So, I was
Yes.
wondering, like you were mentioning the inheritance rights also. So, I was thinking if economic aspects, I mean, sort of women collectives or these self-help groups, they could actually provide women with resources to sort of enter the power politics, basically economic development, so as to, I mean, enable their participation, I mean, in the power arena. So also, one afterthought, I mean, could Lal Ded be promoted as a symbolism? I mean, you mentioned that women are, I mean, they are
Lal
there
Ded.
for each other. So could they sort of reclaim their role through the symbolism of Lal Ded? I mean, yeah.
I think that's a great question, and I have written about that in detail. So let me go to my book chapter on Lalda. That's a very, very good question, and it's very nice to meet you, Aditi. It's very nice to interact with a young scholar from my region of origin. So I love that question. Um, Okay, so I would like to, Professor Patel, with your permission, read out a little from my chapter on Lalda that I think addresses Aditi's question. So Lalda, I believe, is a fitting symbol of the syncretic ethos of Kashmir. Lalda, as you know, is a figure who continues to be respected, highly respected, by both the Pandits and Muslims of Kashmir. And Lal Ded was born in 1334 into a Kashmiri Brahmin home in village Simpur, which is about 4 miles from Srinagar. And she was brutalized in a marriage that was arranged for her by the elders of her family once she crossed the threshold of puberty. She was unwilling to acquiesce to the constraints placed on the traditional woman, and she questioned the self-abnegation of women that disallows them from reconciling their private selves with their roles as public contributors to the community. Lalda disavowed the psychosocial narratives inscribed on the female body in defiance of the continued conscription of women. And I would argue that by committing what was probably considered a sacrilegious act of crossing the threshold of her husband's house in order to choose a life of asceticism, Lal Ded subverted the traditional reliance on male authority. She was a yogini, a professed woman ascetic who disseminated the yogic doctrines with an unquenchable zeal. And I consider Lal Ded a watershed in the cultural and spiritual development of Kashmir. You see, Aditi, again, in response to your question, unconditional freedom from sexualized hierarchies does not exist in any social matrix. Rigid, reprehensible, regressive customs and conventions placed women inferior to men in status, rights, power, and freedom in traditional societies, including Jammu and Kashmir. So let me go to, so Lal Ded's, I believe my analysis of Lal Ded is that her intervention, that she intervened in patriarchal national history by speaking from her location about the political realities that had woven the web of patriarchal social relations. Lal Ded's ability to be alert to how a woman's aspirations for personal emancipation are mediated by her responsibility toward her community, and the ways in which this sense of responsibility inflects her own emancipatory thought underscores Lal Ded's importance for me. She rejected a sexualized persona in order to break the power nexus that underlined and continues to underline the objectification of the damsel in distress. So, does that kind of answer your question, Aditi?
Yes, ma'am, it does. I'll have to read up a lot because you have given a lot of
Yeah,
information.
so this is from my book. I have an entire
Yes.
chapter on Lal Ded.
I'm hoping to read it. And also, seeing you here, it's also sort of a,
Yeah.
you are representing the women from that place. It's kind of an inspiration for me. So, representation
That's
matters.
very kind, but I'm not representing women from that place. I think again it's very important, Aditi, for us to recognize the heterogeneity within the society of Jammu and Kashmir. It is a heterogeneous society. We have women from diverse socioeconomic classes, women of diverse religious leanings, ideological leanings. We also have, as you know, diverse ethnic and linguistic groups in Jammu and Kashmir. So I think for and some diasporic scholars continue to relegate the diversity of Jammu and Kashmir to the background, which I think is highly problematic. So, in any analysis of our politics, in any analysis of uh, insurgency, counterinsurgency, peace building, societal reconstruction, etc., recognizing that diversity of viewpoints is very important. There has never been, you know, we've never had a monolithic Kashmiri woman or a monolithic Kashmiri identity. And that's what I try to call into question in all my work on Kashmiri women. There are some diasporic scholars who, when they write about insurgency in Kashmir, counterinsurgency, they try to create a concept of the monolithic Kashmiri woman. And that is very problematic. Or the monolithic Dogra woman. That is very problematic as well. So very, very nice to meet you.
Same here, ma'am. That was really insightful what you said, and I'll keep that in mind. Intersectionality and diversity. Yeah.
Intersectionality and diversity. Absolutely.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
The women studies scholars are also mentioning Habba Khatun and her work, no? That
Yes,
very,
yes,
very
yes,
popular now in the women
yes.
studies.
So I haven't done much work on Habba Khatun, but I'm familiar with the history of Kashmir, Yusuf Shadshak. I'm familiar with Habba Khatun's poetry. But so women politicians, Habba Khatun was not a politician. But when I think of women like my maternal grandmother, Begum Akbar Jahan Abdullah, I think of, in India, I think of Najma Heptullah. I think of the wife of President Zakir Hussain. I think of Benazir Bhutto in Pakistan. I think of Sheikh Hasina in Bangladesh. I think of Khalida Zia in Bangladesh. All these women politicians did work in their own right, and that cannot be taken away from them. They were able to carve niches for themselves. But the one common denominator is that they were either, my grandmother, for instance, she did a lot of good work in her own right. She was a social and political activist in the 1930s and the 1940s, when women were still struggling to find a place for themselves in that society. But what gave her an edge over other Kashmiri women was the fact that she was the wife of Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah. That gave her an edge. Benazir Bhutto, you see, her education cannot be taken away from her. Her courage cannot be taken away from her. Her courage in the face of military dictatorship. I recognize that. But again, what gave her an edge over other Pakistani women was the fact that she was the daughter of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, or Mrs. Gandhi in India. You know, the work that she did, we cannot take that away from her. The courage that she showed as a woman in Indian society to lead Indians, that cannot be taken away from her. But again, she was the daughter of Jawaharlal Nehru. So that was the one common denominator, you see, being married to an elite politician or being the daughter of an elite politician. Whereas Habba Khatun came from humble beginnings, like Lal Ded. She had a very humble background, and then her marriage to Yusuf Shah Chak, I think, gave her that space that she required to come into her own as a poet. So yes, Mrs. Nidra Mattu has done very good work, not just on Lal Ded, but on Habba Khatun as well. Yeah.
She also renounced, no, her life in Paris or the Habba Khatun.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
She built her own
Yes.
art, stayed
That's
at
right.
the bank.
That's right. That's right. After
Like
Yusuf Shah
Mirabai,
Chak
she
was
also did the
sanctioned.
way Mirabai left Palace. She also left. Very
That's
heroic.
right. That's right. That's right. Yes. Yes.
Very
So
good
I think,
style.
yeah, I think I would like to just make a couple more comments on Lal Ded, if that is okay with you. That might throw a little more light. Okay, so here's what I say in my work on her. I say that Lal Ded was a visionary who broke the intractable frameworks of conventional thought and behavior. I believe that she preempted the modern day psychoanalytic promulgation. Is that too much jargon? She preempted the modern day psychoanalytic promulgation of the concept of self-awareness. Lal Ded has another yet hard saying. The sense of it, adopted in the English wording, is that she utters a cry of despair. Like Christian in The Pilgrim's Progress, Aditi, I don't know if you've read The Pilgrim's Progress, Lal Ded has been bearing on her back a burden of worldly illusions and pleasures. Compared to a load of sugar candy and the knot of the porter's string that supports it has become loose and galls her. She has found that such a burden produces toil and pain. Her wasted life in this workaday world has become a weariness, and she is in despair. She has recourse to her guru, her spiritual teacher. His words cause her intolerable pain, such as that experienced by the loss of a beloved object, which is the worldly illusion that she must abandon. she learns that the whole of the flock of factors that make up her physical existence have lost their proper ruler, the mind, for it is steeped in ignorance of self. Recognizing one's strengths and weaknesses enables one to pave the path towards self-advancement, which is a much sought after goal that would allow people of different intellectual dispositions to relegate life's peripherals to the background and to face the vicissitudes of fate with courage and faith in themselves. It is a Herculean task, not just to recognize the self, but to channelize the confidence which that recognition fosters. Self-awareness enabled Laldev, unobstructed by a false consciousness, to practice religious, cultural, and social iconoclasm in an idolatrous society. So, in an age in which the culture was pervaded by conservative sensibilities, well-defined gender roles, and the confinement of women to home and hearth, Laldad's blatant mockery of those conventions was condemned by the upholders of the hegemonic order. Lalde's self-knowledge highlighted, her self-knowledge enabled her to maintain an unscarred mind in the face of thoughtless condemnation and adversity. Critical intelligence, particularly when expressed by a woman, to break down societal, religious, and cultural edifices has always been intimidating and has always invited criticism, as it did in Lalde's case. The ravages of time and the purported liberation of women in the 21st century have not diminished the potency of Lalde's message, the tangible beauty of her poetry, and its relevance in this day and age. So I think that answers your question, Aditi.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Tripurari Sharma had made music drama on Lalde.
Really?
Yeah, beautiful. It was enacted in the International Drama Festival organized by Mumbai University, where we saw this.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. That's very good to know.
Feminist interpretation.
Yeah, that's very good to know. Yeah. So we still have a long way to go,
Yes.
I believe.
Yeah.
Changing mindsets takes a very, very long time. And as you mentioned political changes, political transformations, constitutional amendments, all that is very well. But cultural practices are so deeply entrenched, even regressive ones, that it takes a lot of work and a long time to uproot them. Yeah.
But I think conversations have to go on to get more clarity and come up with the strategies.
Absolutely. I think this is, for me, this is the first of many conversations that we need to have. Yeah.
It will be of great use because the videos of IMPRI are used by all, because it's on public domain. And everybody, students, scholars, bureaucrats, everyone uses it. And it's going to many.
Yeah. Well, I hope my presentation wasn't too jargony. That's, academics have a difficult time getting away from jargon. I'm trying.
No,
I'm trying, but
because Lucy,
because we speak.
Yeah.
We speak to a niche audience, And that niche audience has the same vocabulary. They use the same jargon. So,
but your
yeah.
delivery was said that you gave time to absorb, and I think it would also give them so many new ideas to explore further, no, by reading and reflecting and discussion.
Yes, I hope so. I hope so. Yes.
Extremely rewarding intellectually. It was a treat, in fact.
Well, thank you. For me, it was a pleasure to interact with you, to interact with everyone. I enjoyed your comments. I learned a lot about what is happening in India today in terms of women's issues and women's rights. So thank you. I enjoyed it very much. And I think, just my my last comment, Professor Patel, when we talk about transnational movements, it is important that we recognize uh, nuances, nuances of context, history, uh, political contexts, cultural contexts, So yes, we can make connections with movements in Palestine, in the Balkan republics, in
Sudan, Congo.
Sorry?
Sudan, Congo.
Sudan, Congo, etc. Yes, we can make connections, but again, there are, the historical context of each place is nuanced. The cultural, political context of each place is nuanced.
That's
and it's
we need to have humility
multi-layered.
humility to learn. That's why we
Correct.
need to have humility to learn, no, from the diverse.
Correct. That is correct. That is correct. And the context of each place is multi-layered as well, including the political and cultural contexts of Jammu and Kashmir. So a lot of diasporic, not a lot, but some diasporic scholars don't recognize that multi-layeredness, So thank you all so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
This was a very good start to my day.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, we admire your commitment so early in the morning. You were so lucid and erudite and clear in your thoughts. Otherwise, in the morning, like one is a bit disorganized and disoriented. Yeah.
Well, this was great for me. Thank you all so much. So have a lovely evening. Minu, is it okay with you if I leave the meeting now?
Sure, ma'am. We look forward to having you at a future IMPRI events, and it's always a pleasure learning from you.
All right. Thank you so much.
So due to the paucity of time, the floor is not open for Q&A sessions, and participants can contact the IMPRI team if they have any questions regarding the session. And moving on to our next session for the day, I would like to invite Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigamji, Visiting Senior Fellow at IMPRI, advocate, author, and researcher of gender and human rights for a session on legal hands-on and interactive session. Over to you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was a really wonderful session, and after that, I really, I'm thinking, if this session really fits into that kind of, the kind of discussion we are having, but still I have to do my job. So today I'll talk about it's a Constitution Day, 26th of November. Every year we celebrate Constitution Day. So I'll talk about the Constitution and the marginalized. And first of all, I'll start with, the concept of founding mothers. We all know, we all talk about the fathers of the Constitution. But me and one of my colleagues, we have, dig into the history, and we just try to find out that there were 15 women in the Constituent Assembly. We have 15 women who participated, and they made a significant contribution, in terms of making up the Constitution. So I'll just, go through their name right now, but you can read them about, their entire history, because we're talking about agency and, diversity. So these women are from diverse backgrounds, and I'll just read their name. So one is Amu Swaminathan, Annie Mascarin, Begum Ezaz Rasool, Dakshiani Velidin. She was a from scheduled caste and, one of the remote areas of India. And she came and she participated during that time, when Constitution was in the making. Then we have Durga Bai Deshmukh, we have Hansa Mehta, and Hansa Mehta also went to the UN deliberations. So you can read about her. Then we have Kamala Chaudhary, Miss Leela Roy, Malti Dev Chaudhary, Purnima Banerjee, Rajkumari Amrita Kaur, Renuka Rees, Sarojini Naidu, Sucheta Kriplani, Vijayalakshmi Pandit. So all these women, they made important contribution in writing the entire this debate. And then if we talk about Constitution of India, we all know it talks about justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity. And even our leaders have spoken about that not only the political equality, but also equality in terms of socioeconomic aspects. So if you talk about social aspects, economic aspects, those are more important things, because we have at that point of getting independence, we have a lot of poverty and unemployment. But even today, we can say that at that point of time, we don't have resources. But today, 75 years later, we are calling ourselves a kind of, 5 trillion economy and so on. But in terms of hunger, this is the screenshot of, the World Food Program. And this international organization, it has put us on, it says that 21% of people who live in India are, are in the position like, they starve, they don't have the food to eat at the end of the day. So 1/4 of undernourished people live in India out of 1.3 billion population. In terms of global hunger index, India ranked 105 out of 127 countries in 2024. In 2023, this rank was 111 out of 125 countries. And this is the ranking over the years, which you can see. The gender gap report, it says that, the India score very low in terms of, even if we compare ourselves to our neighboring countries. It says that women in India make rupees 40 for every rupees 100 earned by men. So in terms of participation of women in formal workforce, it is 28% as compared to 82% of men. There is a report by Asia Pacific Human Development report in 2024. It says that there is a persistent wealth divide, which is driven by various factors, which include globalization and technological advances. And women, according to this report, are only 23% of the labor force. So there's a lot of precarity. We have a lot of jobs on contract. And before the pandemic, also only 30 to 40% of regular salaried adult earners had job, which provide them any social security. So we lack that social security thing, especially if we talk about unorganized workers and informal sector. Now, another Oxfam report, which is titled "Survival of the Richest," it says that India owns, 5% of the people own more than 60% of the country's wealth. So, there is a lot of difference between the elite and the marginalized in terms of, wealth. And if we talk about social and economic distribution of wealth, there is a lot of difference. So India has 110 million informal sector workers, and this data was released by NSSO. The share of workers, if we talk about, this is another report, if we talk about sector-wise division, so women are more in domestic and household work, if you see the percentage. In construction work, we have more men as compared to women. And there are other sectors too that you can just go through. So this is, India's gig workforce has also, they estimated that by 2030, it will reach by 2.35 crores. And who are these gig workers? They are individual employed transactionally on a time or task-based manner. And they have flexibility to choose their work, but then they are, deprived of various social security benefits. So as we have seen that, during the hot summers, the people who were delivering goods for various companies such as Amazon or Flipkart or any other companies, they bear the brunt during the hottest hours. And the salaries they get is surely very less. And again, when talk about providing goods within 10 minutes, again the kind of safety and security issues which emerged during if person is delivering within 10 minutes. So they have filed a case before the Supreme Court, and this organization, Indian Federation of App-Based Transport Workers, IFAT, they filed a case before the Supreme Court, and this case came to hearing on November 19, 2024, and they in their petition they said that we are not getting equal rights. Our right to life is being denied, and the companies called us as partners, but in the name of partners, they are not giving us benefits which should be given to the employees. So there is a failure of the workmen or employee the benefits any other workman will get under the Factories Act or under any other labor laws, though those are being denied because the companies are calling them as partners and not as employees. And obviously during the pandemic, and they have and during other kind of situations, it's just a kind of exploitation of labor. So they have filed this case, and the Supreme Court during one of the hearing, it says that the government cannot deny the gig workers their right under the guise of policy decision. Now, the government has to file a response, and the case is still pending, but this is what the initial observations being made by the courts. So we have seen how capitalism is exploitative. We have been hearing that, how the top business people are talking about 70 hours advice. But we have also seen that in practice, how the employees, the young employees who are working in factories are, facing a lot of work stress. And we have this case also a few months back where one of the person died due to work stress. So, on the one hand, we have read the theory of Karl Marx and all exploitative kind of things, but this is what is happening, in reality. So even if we talk about those employees who are working in big companies, the company, how much money the company is paying them, and how much work stress they are facing, that I think needs a kind of whole lot of research. And on the top, this thing, that kind of narrative which is being built, that you should work for more hours. And even this person is comparing with Mr. Modi, that you work for 100 hours like Mr. Modi is doing. But then Mr. Modi is getting a lot of social security, social benefits, which other employees are not getting. So we have to really, take that into account. Here, this is something which is, globally what is happening, that even if the employee, they're working for, if the CEO of the company and the lowest level clerk, they're working for the same, hours, number of hours in a day. So what the salary the clerk would be getting and the salary the CEO would be getting, so huge difference. So, but otherwise, if we talk about, the marginal sector, in terms of food security, we have only 10% of around 10% of Indians have experienced food security. And this is a study which is being conducted by Public Health Foundation of India. It was conducted in 2023. and in 2 districts. One is in Sonipat, Haryana, and another is in Vizag, Andhra Pradesh. So they contacted 9,005 individuals between October 2018 and February 2019. And one of the key finding of the study is that the gender aspect of the food insecurity. And it says that women reported higher food insecurity than men. The study found that women, especially from rural areas, they have low consumption of nutrient-rich foods such as dairy fruits, vegetables, and non-vegetarian foods. Even otherwise, consumption of starchy staple was high, and intake of legumes and vitamin A rich food, that is very less among women. Now, why this is happening? Because women tend to prioritize food for their male members and children, and also the study reported that a lot of wastage of food which occurs during transportation from the farm to the plate. In past, PUCL has filed a petition during the decades of 1990s when a lot of people were dying because of starvation, and the food was rotting in the godowns of FCI, Food Corporation of India. So PUCL filed a petition before the Supreme Court that there is a lot of corruption in the public distribution system, and there was no transparency. So they filed a petition under Article 21 of the Constitution, which says that everyone has a right to life with human dignity. And after that, Supreme Court has given a lot of interim decisions. This case went on for more than 2.5 decades, and a lot of interim orders were given, and the government has to formulate a lot of schemes such as Sampoorn Gramin Yojana, midday meal schemes, national benefit maternity schemes for pregnant ladies from below poverty line, old age pension schemes, and there are a lot of schemes which are being formulated. And during that time, the Right to Food campaign was created by the civil society, and they came out with the slogan "Bhuke Pet Bhare Godam," starving bellies and full godowns. And they advocated, they ensured not even whatever the orders which are being given by the Supreme Court, they should be monitored, whether they are being implemented at the ground level, whether food is reaching to the people or not. So they did constant advocacy for a number of years, and then finally we have National Food Security Act in 2013. Now, as per this National Food Security Act, it says that the eldest adult female will be recorded as the head of the household for the purpose of ration card. It includes midday meal schemes, ICDS schemes, and PDS. And it says that the children should be given midday meals in the schools, and so a lot of these kind of things are now being legalized, legitimized, so people can talk about food as right. So Professor Bakshi, he commented that law and fundamental rights have been used as a tool by activist group, and further this is a kind of new politics that was broadly a constitutional politics, because constitution, through the constitution principles, we have created this right to food. But the scholar says that there are a lot of gaps and challenges in the implementation of this scheme. It says that the PDS system, public distribution system, itself has a long history of implementation. It started during the late colonial period, so it has a lot of scope for corruption, and there was no transparency, and that still continue at some level. Though right now the government has linked PDS system with Aadhaar, and this is all digitalized, but a lot of problems are still exist. They still exist, because what is happening is that even if the fingerprint is not matching for someone, that person is being denied, their ration by the ration shops, and this is leading to starvation deaths. You may have heard of, young children being dying because of starvation. They couldn't access to the ration shop. They couldn't get the ration because of all these issues. Because there's a lot of problem in terms of digital, how it is being handled. So, and basically, people are being denied protein-rich diet, which activists say that it is essential, but sometimes the eggs are not given, or sometimes various other problems comes in. So people are being denied their right to food still. But in terms of human rights framework, various organizations, what they are saying is that we have to make available all a wide range of diverse food containing various micronutrients. We have to talk about diverse farming. We have to ensure that women who are the principal caregivers of young children, they should make informed decisions about food and feeding, and we should adopt a human right framework, while dealing with the right to food. So that I think we have to still implement, because we have to link the right to food with farming, with the role of women. So it has to be looked at the broader level, at the broader, in its aspect. So people have suggested, civil society has suggested that what are the solution to poverty, inequality, and starvation. They said that it may be, we have to link fundamental rights and directive principles of state policy. We have to talk about law like NAREGA, right to health, right to education. So all these have to be linked, and all these have to be, we have to ensure that people are getting all these schemes. But what is happening is that uh, there is a constant cutting of funds. The funds are being not being they are constantly being reduced, or the services are not being delivered properly. So there is a lot of difference in terms of what is being written on the books and what is happening at the ground level. So this leads to certain questions. So because when we talk about India as a welfare state, then how we are making decisions to allocate the resources. What are the duties of the state vis-a-vis citizen? Because right now there's a lot of debate about duty of citizens, but what about the duties of the state? Are they fulfilling their duties, especially towards the marginalized? Why claiming citizenship entitlement is difficult for some people. When we talk about state-citizen relationship, and especially when we talk from the perspective of the marginalized, those who cannot access code, those who cannot, read or write. So what are the, how the government is ensuring that it is the constitutional promises of equality and justice are being fulfilled? The state has resources, power, and capabilities to create appropriate conditions. But when the state is not doing that, the state, people are forced to face unjust situation. In that situation, what should be done, and who should intervene? So the right to shelter or right to health are still not declared as fundamental rights. We have declared right to education as a fundamental right. Earlier, it was in Article 45 under Directive Principles of State Policy. But because of consistent advocacy, now it is being recognized as Article 21A, that is right to education. But other rights in terms of health, in terms of shelter, those are still under directive principles of state policy. We have still not recognized them as legal rights. So that the politicians are debating about freebies and reveries and everything else. But what about Human Development Index? What about poverty, starvation, and inequalities which are existing in societies? So why are we debating on freebies and reveries when we have a lot of resources, but then those are not being equally distributed? So here a lot of people are protesting, and they are demanding that their right should be given, that we are not demanding any kind of doles or kind of services, or it's our right, and that we are demanding. So what I would like to say here is that hunger and poverty are not the issue of production or lack of resources, but it is of political failure. So similarly, inequality and injustice are political issues. And I think we have to take steps to resolve it accordingly. So again, like the last in the last presentation, we have talked about mindset. We have talked about that will take some time. So how to change the mindset of our this kind of system which is creating inequalities. So I'll just stop here. Maybe we can have more discussion.
We extend our heartfelt gratitude, ma'am, for the legal hands-on and interactive session and for sharing your insights with us. I would like to now invite the chair, Vibhuti ma'am, to share her remarks. Over to you,
Thank you,
ma'am.
Advocate Shalu Nigam. On a Constitution Day, you made the most appropriate presentation, linking up so many issues rooted in political economy and material reality, and the question of human rights, that the broadening of the horizons of human rights. It's not only the formal democracy, but also the real livelihood issues of the common people. And you chose to focus on the marginalized. That's very important. Need of an hour. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, I would like to open the floor for a Q&A session. Participants can either raise their hand or type their questions in the Q&A box or chat box. Yes, Ms. Aditi Chaudhary ji, please go ahead.
Yes, good evening, ma'am. On this Constitution Day, I wanted to ask that, I mean, we are still not focusing on the spirit of the Constitution specifically. I mean, everything that happens around us, right from domestic violence to every violence against women. And the most appalling thing to me is the elimination of the identity of founding mothers of our Constitution. I mean, they are sort of relegated to background, not even relegated. I think they are not even talked about in the main discourse. And this work by Achyut Chetan, which I'm very looking forward to reading it. I mean, he has sort of um, brought this into limelight. I mean, that founding mothers of the Constitution. So I was wondering, I mean, if we are to start this narrative, I mean, to propagate this narrative more. Uh, I mean, onus lies on this onus lie on the government, which claims women-led development, civil society, or I mean, yeah, I mean, government or civil society or people in general. I mean, they should have this inquisitivity to, I mean, to sort of know who were the people who founded our, I mean, who sort of worked on our constitution. I mean, it is criminal to ignore the, I mean, the women members of the, I mean, the Constituent Assembly. So, what are your thoughts on that? And also, Vibhuti ma'am, if you could offer any insight on that.
There has been complete erasure, no? So that the onus lies on us, all those who are committed to women's rights and human rights, and uh, so all these women who are hidden from history, they have to be the way they said that Lalte and Hapa Khatun in Kashmir. So these are the 15 women who contributed towards this thing. They were the fighters and writers and freedom fighters, and they were very articulate, renowned, learned women who made very important contribution within during the Constituent Assembly. And we need to do more, like when it comes to giving project work to the students in schools and colleges, or doing PhD thesis on each one of them, and archival material regarding them, their diaries, their speeches at All India Radio, or their writings, their newspaper coverage, all that should be sourced, and we can reconstruct the history. So I think our responsibility is also there. We have to continuously remind, because no society can live without icon. Because currently, when you go to any college or school, people are talking of only Bollywood actresses or the models as icons, no? Or the dancers as icons. These women who dedicated their life for nation building, they are not even seen as icon. And it's not no fault of theirs, because nobody has told them about it. None of our history books mention them. Or at the most, Sarojini Naidu is mentioned because we have a National Women's Day. Her birthday is considered to be National Women's Day. That too, after a lot of effort by the women's movement and women's studies scholar. So I think we need to continuously remember. So every time there is that's why I think we should comment Dr. Shalu Nigam, that on Constitution Day, so many functions, thousands of functions are taking place all over the country. And she has chosen to focus on them. Founding mothers, everyone talks of founding fathers. So I think it's very important that we continuously talk about them, write about them, and amplify the voices, because they have written quite a lot, including women's role in planned economy. That was also prepared by Dr. Hansa Mehta, Madam Rajbade. And all these women have written essays, they have written poetry, they have given public speeches. We need to popularize that.
I remember in 2016 when I sit with Sister Mary Zakaria and we were writing this book, we were collecting information, and suddenly I realized that we have Sucheta Kriplani Hospital over here in Delhi, and I never knew that who is Sucheta Kriplani. No, I never even thought of who is she, or what could be her role. And then when we were collecting this material, and I just came across her name. And it was kind of the kind of shock for me that why I have missed such an important figure in my life. So during the schools, during the college, we are not talking about these women.
We had a 16th National Conference of Women's Studies in Trivandrum, in a women's college, just opposite just in front of the gate of that college. We had Annie Mascherano's huge statue, but nobody was even, then when we read the plate, we realized that, okay, she has done such an important work. But none of the textbooks in Kerala have, I don't think they have a profile on Annie Mascherano's. The statue was there.
While I was collecting this material, we went to this library, Nehru Memorial Library. Like, people were not aware that where this material would be available, and to really search for material. And for some women, we couldn't find, like Kamala Chaudhary, we couldn't get much of the material. So some women are completely, and some women have.
But you have to trace their grandchildren and great grandchildren to get if they have preserved their diaries and notes and this thing, whatever pictures and posters and all. So that's I think about that's what Geraldine Forbes, historian, that's what she did. She collected the pictures and constructed history. So multiple sources we need to access to construct their role.
Are there any other questions?
And discuss the projects.
Seeing as there are none, we'll thank the speaker and move on. Now, I would thank you, ma'am, for your inspiring and engaging talk with us. It is always a pleasure to learn from you, and we look forward to having you at our future IMPRI events. Thank you, ma'am. And now I invite participants to kindly update their research projects by introducing the topic they would like to work upon. And I request everyone to kindly raise your hands if you would like to go first and unmute.
Yeah.
Yes,
Kushal.
Good evening, panelists. Am I audible?
Yeah, please.
Ma'am, actually, I have changed my topic after our second session on cyber law. So I have spoken to the people, and then they told they have confirmed with the team and I could move on. So my topic right now is anonymity of perpetrators, a legal analysis. So my abstract basically, should I share the screen, ma'am? I have my...
Yeah, but you haven't shared by email, no?
I have shared by email, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am, I have
But the
shared.
change topic?
Yes. With the change topic abstract, I have submitted my abstract, hypothesis, statement of problem, my research question, and my research objectives. At the same time, I have also included my research methodology and my research plan for the research paper. So basically, this is a typical paper which I do it in my college. So I have written it on basis of the same thing. So shall I move on with my abstract, ma'am?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. So, my abstract goes like tackling of the ubiquitous problems of online harassment and cyberbullying from a comprehensive perspective in our dignity, a concerned society. So, stay has enough. These problems go beyond screens and have profound effects on the society, psychology, and emotions. This research paper explores the concept of the complex nature of online harassment, looking at the psychological and societal ramifications, especially for young people who are already at risk. Through an extensive literature review, I have found that there is a lack of research literature gap on anonymity of perpetrators, and it highlights the state of existing knowledge and highlights the need for the solutions that go beyond the conventional cybersecurity measures. Firstly, this research paper will give you with a start with a giving brief introduction to cyberbullying and includes its definition and characteristics. Next, the paper discuss about several types of cyberbullying, including harassment, trolling, and hate speech. And every one of these types of cyberbullying has a variety of negative effects, and many of which are severe and in worse situations may even be fatal to the victim. So it emphasizes on how important the frameworks for law and policies are in discouraging offenders and safeguarding the victims. So it also identifies that the set technology such as identity verification and inscription and enhanced content moderation is necessary to provide a safer online environment. And the study attempts to examine the linguistic and legal issues of cyberbullying from an interdisciplinary approach given the complexity of cyberbullying. My hypothesis is that it depends on how the impairment of the enforcement of the cyber laws take place due to the anonymity of perpetrators, and this create a very significant challenge while prosecuting and identifying the offenders. Therefore, addressing this issue may require reform which should be targeted, and this helps the enhancement of the ability of the law enforcement. And comparative analysis of different jurisdictions can also provide and improve the consistency globally to address this online harassment and cyberbullying in the aspects of anonymity of perpetrators. My statement of problem is very clear. This research paper aims to examine how the anonymity of perpetrators affect the enforcement of cyber law and to contribute in proposing various ways to help development of the consistency of international standards on cyber laws. My research question is how the anonymity of perpetrators affect the enforcement of the cyber laws in India. Ma'am, my topic basically arrived from like we in college I have cyber law as paper, so I'm only reading with IT Act and the DPDP Act. So basically there are many provisions which do not cover anonymity of perpetrators, and this is the basic reason why the cyber crimes have increased more in online platform. So my question is dealing with this, and also I wanted to add upon how this intermediaries like Instagram and other digital apps are
Artificial
basically
intelligence, deep fake.
yes, deep fakes and everything. So I also wanted to include that, but for now I just for giving a draft about my proposal, I have just added anonymity of perpetrators and their enforcement in cyber laws.
You should read
Research.
literature from IT for Change and Anita Gurumurthy's article. I have listed the link in the chat
Okay.
box. IT for
Okay, ma'am.
Change. Another thing is a FAT, F-A-T, Feminist for Technology, Feminist and Technology. That is also a very good group. They empower NGOs and women's rights organizations in all over the country. They give workshop on cyber safety and how to negotiate cyber technology. That is also it's a group of women scientists and technology persons. FAT. I'll just.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, and also I had an idea about these are the two topics and I was having another topic in mind which I was actually confused. So ma'am, and also I wanted to write on how there is a critical analysis on DPDP Act is a very small act, ma'am. So I thought I would also do a critical analysis on the DPDP Act. IT Act has 53 plus sections, so that would not be possible. So, but then we can do something with DPDP Act, is what I had in mind.
Yeah, but I think you now focus, first of all, you go through the existing literature, do the gap analysis, and then you narrow down the topic, no? Because you have just how many, 4 months for the submission?
3 months, ma'am.
Yeah.
Okay, ma'am, I'll keep that in mind that I have
You
3 months.
you will be doing mostly content analysis, no?
Yes, ma'am,
Then
mostly
you can
if,
broaden the this thing, scope, no problem.
yes, ma'am.
You can.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. That's it.
All the best. I have
Thank you.
written a link of feminist practice of and technology.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
That link is also there.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
It is a feminist approach to technology. FAT, F-A-T.
Okay, ma'am.
Ms. Aditi Chowdhury, please go ahead.
Yes, ma'am, I have shared my abstract.
Yes. I
Yes,
responded also.
Yes, so I wanted to sort of focus on socioeconomic development, keeping in mind Galtung's structural violence, because of which, peace is affected. And also, I wanted to sort of show that there is synergy between institutional and, citizen initiatives. So, community work program case study that I took from post-apartheid South Africa, I'll be focusing on that specifically. Yeah.
What will be your entry point? African National Congress or the Women's?
Yes, ma'am. First of all, offering a background of how, they negotiated a peace settlement, and then we had sort of this truth building commission, but we actually had to address socioeconomic aspects. So that's
Where
how.
are you based?
Ma'am, Jammu.
You
Presently in Jammu.
Acha, but yeah, there are online sources also there.
Yes, ma'am. So I'll be doing mostly content analysis. I'm not moving to this, primary sources as of now.
Correct.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Shaluji, your suggestions?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, you can do the content analysis. And also, but there are a lot of judgments which are there, which are coming up right now. So you can also look at that, because judgments are, how the laws are being interpreted. Because what we write in a law, and there's a lot of difference between content of the law and the interpretation of the law. So if you look at the judgments, how the courts are interpreting the provisions and where are the gaps, that could be also another, kind of dimension you can add, if you can add.
Even for the previous topic on the information technology, there have been so many judgments on deep fake, no? So that also could be critical reflection on that also would be useful.
Yeah, because law is something, because something which we write in law and how it is being implemented, how it is being interpreted. So there's a lot of gap between the intent of the law and its implementation. So that is the major area of the gap. And if, as a researchers, we have to identify that, why this gap is coming and how the courts are interpreting. If the clients are really, the subjects are really getting the justice or not. So those are certain things which we can look into.
Now,
Are there any other participants?
Samhita, Sanmati.
Yes. Hi. Good evening, Professor Vibhuti and Shalu Nigam ma'am also. So I had sent my abstract, and my focus is on visibilizing the experiences of women with disabilities in India. And I had received your comment saying that I can narrow it down a little bit more because it's too general. So one idea that I had thought of is to focus on women women with disability in Tamil Nadu, and specifically locomotor disability.
That's what I meant.
Yes, yes, and uh, I am oscillating between two focuses, uh, questions to focus on. One is to understand the intersection of societal ableism and gender biases, uh, and how it impacts the lived experiences of women. And the other one is also to wondering if I should look at the impact of it in career or social inclusion or navigating family. So this is where right now I'm considering what would be.
About the law and policy, Dr. Shalu Nigam, can you say?
Yeah, a lot of groups they have been working on legal rights of disabled people, and there's a whole lot of activism which has been going on. So if you look at the history of the entire movement, disability movement, and how they have addressed the gender aspect of disability, so you will find a lot of literature on that. And I think CWDS has also done some research on gender and disability, and the PLDs has focused on disability and law. So you can look at those research and then identify, where are the gaps.
Right. Makes sense. Thank you.
Are there any other participants present who would like to speak? Seeing as there are none, we will move on. I would now like to invite the chair, Professor Vibhuti Patelji, for her
I
closing
have shared the
remarks.
link of PLD in the chat box. Partners in Law and Development, what Dr. Shalu Nigam told us, they have done a lot of work on disability.
I am not able to see the link in the chat box.
Partners in Law and Development. If you just
Law and Development.
just write PLD, Delhi, you will get their website. Exhaustive. They also have archives. All of us have also contributed to whatever documentation we had to PLD archives.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
With the permission of the chair, we will now move on to the vote of thanks. Madam Chair, may we proceed?
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. As we come to the end of the day 4 of the LPPYF Law and Public Policy Youth Fellowship Cohort 4.0 Winter 24, the theme Inclusivity in Peace and Conflict Resolution, Rethinking Policy, Advocacy and Implementation, an online national winter school program, a 3-month immersive online law and public policy awareness certificate training course and internship program. I, Meenu Mohan, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, would like to propose the formal vote of thanks on behalf of IMPRI, New Delhi. We are grateful to our chair, Professor Vibhuti Patelji, and the experts for the day 4 of the session, Professor Nyla Ali Khan and Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigamji, for taking out their valuable time and for their thought-provoking insights on the topics. We thank all our participants who have raised pertinent questions and actively participated in today's deliberation. We look forward to welcoming you on day 5 of this certification course on December 3rd, 2024, on Tuesday, featuring distinguished experts Ms. Stuti Roy and Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam. We would be grateful if you watch us later on YouTube, listen to us on our various podcasts, or read our publications. We hope you continue to join in the future to IMPRI #Web Policy Talk and #Web Policy Learning. Wishing you all a good day. Thank you.
Thank you, Meenu Mohan, for moderating the session so well.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Shalu Nigam.